Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm here to tell you a story, and it's not a good one. It was a dark time, and before we go any further, I want to say to any of my classmates who have family members that are affected by COVID-19, um, I truly hope that they recover and they find a way to make sure that they are treated as soon as possible. And with that said, I want to take you guys to a time where a pandemic hit America and a century ago. And no one knew at the time whether or not what was going to happen because no one expected this kind of virus, and it was happening during World War I, and no one could even predict the outcome and the amount of death toll it would um, cause for people. And I am talking about the Spanish flu, also known as, and to be scientifically correct, is the H1N1 or the avian flu, the bird flu, basically. The bird flu, um, as I was researching this and learning more and more about this deadly disease, had an had of its own unknown origin, as in researchers like the how we would say the Fauci of their time, um, John Oakes Edward of was the epidemiologist, and he theorized it came into three different parts of the world: Europe, Asia, and in America. In Europe, there was two places. It happened in first in the winter of 1916, before the pandemic happened in 1918, and another time in southwest London, 1917. But by then, they had realized that the war was ending and people were soldiers were coming home from both sides. So it was then later on that he posited that, okay, maybe let's go to Kansas because there was another pandemic. There was an outbreak that happened in Kansas where a doctor apparently reported in February there were like 18 cases and only 3 people died. So he thought that, okay, maybe it was in Kansas, but then again they realized it was not in Kansas. And then finally we go to China. Yes, that same country where COVID started is literally in China. And to their surprise, it wasn't even remotely there because they found out that the people who were dying showed signs and symptoms that were mimicking the pneumonic plague, also known as, or later on would be called like the bubonic plague. So it wasn't even remotely close to China for that matter. So with that said, how, you know, because how did they actually combat all this? Because it had similar symptoms to what people would be calling it as the bird flu. So how did they combat this? Well, believe it or not, quarantining was the one way to go. People had actually practiced social distancing, which is in effect today because of COVID. But in sorry, but in essence, this entire time that the Spanish flu was going around, there was no cure. They had no idea of what it was like, so they closed down schools. They practiced self quarantine. Even if you're gonna spit, you cannot spit on the ground. That's considered loitering right away. So they had to practice it by spitting on a handkerchief. Yes, it's nasty, but it was really the practice at the time. And by then, around 1937, 1936, that scientists finally discovered a way to combat this virus. And believe it or not, this kind of virus, this kind of vaccine was actually the precursor to all kind of vaccines that we actually should be getting every year if you have the flu, because this kind of strain vaccine was still used, although it has evolved throughout the years to combat the flu itself. And so, with that said, you know, after reading this and learning all about it, how the Spanish flu or the bird flu affected everyone, it's easy to blame one country because they thought that it was not in their. They thought it was in Spain, but in reality, there was not even a single big case as it was with England or France or even in Kansas, let alone China. And so, but and so it helps to know we stay informed and we do our part in society to keep combating the sickness that is today, and how similar and how coincidental this pandemic and how it's affecting millions, even billion, the whole world basically. So, with that said, thank you, fellow students. Stay safe and stay healthy, and keep in touch.